Florida's governor once boasted that paradise was on the rise, home prices doubling, 330,000 new arrivals in a single year, bidding wars that seemed endless. But when buyers vanished overnight and sales collapsed, even the governor of Florida was left reeling, forced to watch as confidence and deals crumbled faster than a beach house in a storm. Insurance costs exploding, locals priced out, and billion-dollar investors running for the exits. This isn't just a housing market meltdown. It's a crisis powerful enough to bring the state's top leader to tears. How did a dream market turn so dangerous that nobody, not even the governor, saw the breaking point coming? The answer starts where the boom began. Sunrise over Biscayne Bay, and the moving trucks kept coming. In 2021 alone, more than 330,000 new residents crossed state lines for Florida, enough to fill a city the size of Tampa, twice over. By year's end, the population topped 22 million, a milestone that put Florida ahead of every state but Texas and California. The surge wasn't random. IRS migration tables, census records, and a flood of new driver's licenses told us the same story. New York, New Jersey, and California led the exodus, each sending tens of thousands south. More than 90,000 New Yorkers arrived in just 3 years, with New Jersey and California close behind. The draw was obvious for many. High taxes, strict COVID lockdowns, and cold winters pushed families and remote workers to look for something better. Florida's pitch was simple: low taxes, and a lifestyle that promised freedom. For retirees, the move meant a final escape from snow shovels and sky-high property taxes. For tech workers and young families, it was a shot at bigger homes and open schools. In Miami-Dade, Palm Beach, and Broward, the influx hit hardest. Aventura's 33160, Palm Beach Gardens 33418, and Fort Myers's 33913 became magnets for newcomers. Some zip codes in Lee and St. Johns counties posted double-digit population growth in a single year, fueled by new construction and the promise of good schools. Inside the State House, the governor wasted no time taking credit. Ron DeSantis called the migration wave a referendum on his policies. Open schools, business-friendly rules, and a hands-off approach to pandemic restrictions. National headlines followed, and real estate promoters plastered the message everywhere. Florida wasn't just open for business, it was open for life. By late 2021, every moving company from U-Haul to Allied Van Lines reported Florida as the nation's top inbound destination. The numbers were so lopsided that rental trucks became scarce in Manhattan and Newark, while wait lists for new homes stretched for months in Boca Raton and Palm Beach Gardens. The newcomers didn't just fill up existing neighborhoods. They drove demand for everything: condos on Brickell, suburban homes near Weston, and sprawling developments in Estero and St. John's. Builders rushed to pour foundations, but even they couldn't keep up. In some tracts, population grew by more than 10% in a single year. The fastest-growing zip codes mapped neatly onto the migration data, showing the strongest gains wherever new arrivals could find space and amenities. For a moment, it seemed like the dream was working. Paradise, as advertised, was in high demand. But with each new arrival, the pressure on local housing mounted. The next chapter wasn't about who was moving in. It was about what happened to prices when they did. In Boca Raton, a 3-bedroom house that sold for $480,000 in 2019 closed at $975,000 by the spring of 2022. The same story played out up and down the coast. Realtors fielded calls from New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, buyers ready to wire cash without stepping foot in the state. Virtual tours became the norm. In Miami-Dade, nearly a third of homes sold sight unseen. In Palm Beach, agents reported listings drawing 8, 10, even 15 offers within days. The median home in Broward spent less than 10 days on the market. In the hottest zip codes, properties vanished in under a week. Bidding wars broke out over everything from new condos in Brickell to 1970s ranch homes in Delray Beach. Offers came in above asking, often with no inspection and no contingencies. Some buyers sent personal letters and family photos, hoping to stand out in a sea of cash. Others skipped the pleasantries and offered to cover closing costs or pay for the seller's move. MLS data from the 2021 to 2022 peak shows the region's average home received 9 or more offers, triple the pre-pandemic pace. In East Boca and Coral Gables, the number climbed even higher. National chains like Redfin and Compass reported bidding war rates above 80%, second only to Silicon Valley. For every accepted contract, several hopefuls walked away empty-handed. Out-of-state buyers, flush with equity from selling in pricier markets, drove the frenzy. They competed fiercely for waterfront homes, new construction, and anything with a pool. Remote workers snapped up townhomes in Weston and Jupiter, while retirees battled for condos in Aventura. Local families, already squeezed by rising rents, found themselves outbid again and again. The pace left even seasoned real estate agents stunned. One broker in Palm Beach described it as a feeding frenzy. If you blinked, you missed it. Another in Miami Beach called it the wildest market of my career. As prices soared, so did expectations. Sellers set deadlines for offers, sometimes just 48 hours after listing. Buyers waived appraisals and financed above list price, betting values would keep rising. Governor Ron DeSantis took a victory lap. At a ribbon cutting in Naples, he declared, "Florida is proof that freedom works. People are voting with their feet, and they're choosing our state." Headlines echoed the message. For now, Paradise still sold itself, but the bill was coming due. Insurance was supposed to be the safety net beneath Florida's housing boom. Instead, it became the wild card that could break a deal, or break a family's budget. Premiums doubled between 2021 and 2024, with some coastal homeowners now facing annual bills over $10,000. 6 insurance carriers failed since 2022, their reserves drained by hurricane payouts, runaway reinsurance costs, and a legal system that turned every roof leak into a potential lawsuit. Citizens Property Insurance, the state-backed insurer of last resort, ballooned to 1.3 million policies at its peak, covering homes that private companies refused to touch. In Broward and Miami-Dade, Citizens became the only option for entire neighborhoods. But Citizens was never designed to carry this much weight. Its reserves, strong on paper, are dwarfed by the risk of a single major storm. If losses exceed what Citizens and its reinsurance partners can cover, the bill lands on every policyholder in Florida, home, auto, even renters, through mandatory assessments. A $10 billion deficit after a hurricane could mean hundreds in extra charges for families already stretched thin. The crisis runs deeper than storms. Florida accounts for 80% of all U.S. homeowners insurance lawsuits, yet just 9% of claims. Legal analysts trace this to unique state incentives. Law firms and adjusters can profit handsomely from repeated, sometimes inflated, claims. A cottage industry sprang up, with contractors recruiting homeowners to file suits for everything from wind damage to water leaks. The result? Premiums rose for everyone, and insurers either jacked up rates or walked away entirely. Reinsurance, the insurance that insurers buy, became its own pressure point. Global reinsurers, spooked by billion-dollar losses and the threat of climate-driven superstorms, raised prices and trimmed capacity. Florida companies found themselves paying more for less protection, passing the cost to homeowners. For many, the math no longer worked. In Lee County, a typical Citizens policy now costs $6,500 a year, with private quotes often topping $12,000. In Miami-Dade, some policies run even higher. Carla Rodriguez, a teacher in Hollywood, opened her renewal notice to find her premium had jumped from $4,800 to $9,200, nearly doubling in less than 2 years. Her mortgage payment stayed the same, but insurance now ate up nearly as much as her loan. She called her agent, only to hear that switching companies wasn't an option. The private market had vanished. Citizens was the last stop. For Carla and thousands like her, the dream of homeownership now meant living with a financial time bomb. Citizens executives warn that even with recent reforms and a shrinking policy count, the system remains fragile. As of June 2025, Citizens still covers more than 777,000 homes, with $295 billion in exposure. One major hurricane, Andrew, Ian, or the next big name, could force assessments on every insured Floridian, not just those in the path of the storm. The safety net has become a shared burden, stretching thinner with every new policy. For now, the risk is spread across millions, but the next disaster could reveal just how exposed everyone really is. Mortgage math has turned brutal across South Florida. A 30-year fixed loan on a median-priced home now runs more than $2,100 a month, double what buyers faced 3 years ago. That extra $1,100 isn't a rounding error. It's the difference between qualifying for a starter home and getting locked out entirely. For families who stretch to buy at the peak, the monthly squeeze lands like a second mortgage. Insurance premiums alone can rival the cost of the loan. Nearly 41,000 homes now sit unsold in the Tri-County region, up 50% from last year. MLS data shows the inventory surge isn't just a number, it's a sign that the pipeline is clogged, with sellers waiting and buyers vanishing. Pending sales have slipped 11% in the first quarter of 2025, and the average time on market hovers near 60 days. For every new listing, fewer buyers show up, and those who do demand concessions, rate buy-downs, prepaid insurance, even roof repairs. In Pembroke Pines, real estate agent Luis Morales scans his phone for updates on listings that once would have flown off the market. Now, price cuts are routine. He describes a chain reaction. One canceled deal triggers another, and soon a whole block of contracts unravels. "I had 5 closings lined up in March," he says. 2 buyers walked after their insurance quotes doubled at the last minute. Another lost financing when the appraisal came in low. By the end of the week, only 1 made it to closing. Stories like these echo across Broward, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade. A family in Coral Springs backs out after their lender raises the required down payment. In Weston, a seller agrees to cover a year of homeowner's insurance just to keep a buyer at the table. The math keeps shifting. Today's pre-approval doesn't guarantee tomorrow's closing. For locals, the dream of homeownership has become a moving target. Incomes haven't kept pace with the cost of entry. Payment-to-income ratios have shot past 40% in some zip codes, the highest since the last housing bubble. Agents report that even well-qualified buyers are pausing, waiting for prices or rates to fall. Meanwhile, sellers who bought in 2022 face a grim choice: cut the price, offer cash at closing, or watch equity vanish. The result is a standoff. Inventory piles up, deals collapse, and confidence erodes with every new cancellation. The open houses that once drew crowds now sit empty. For every family hoping to move in, another quietly packs up and moves out, unable to keep up with the relentless cost spiral. The market's foundation, steady demand, affordable payments, reliable insurance, has cracked, leaving buyers and sellers stranded on opposite sides of a widening gap. August 24th, 1992. Before dawn, Hurricane Andrew slammed into Homestead with winds topping 165 miles per hour. Entire neighborhoods vanished in a matter of hours. Roofs ripped off, walls flattened, streets buried beneath tangled debris. For families huddled in closets or under kitchen tables, the sound was relentless. Metal shrieking, glass shattering, the roar of wind like a freight train that never passed. By sunrise, more than 28,000 homes, apartments, and mobile units were reduced to rubble. Another 107,000 suffered major damage. In the days that followed, over 180,000 Floridians were left homeless, their lives scattered across makeshift shelters, church gyms, and tent cities that sprang up on school fields from Cutler Ridge to Florida City. The devastation rewrote every record. Insurance claims topped $15 billion, an unimaginable sum at the time. Power lines lay tangled for miles, water systems failed, and entire blocks disappeared from the map. Families camped in cars or lined up for bottled water and basic supplies. Schools closed for weeks, and businesses locked their doors, not knowing if they would ever reopen. The air hung heavy with the smell of splintered pine and diesel from rescue trucks. For survivors, the memories never faded. One mother described the silence after the storm as worse than the wind. No birds, no engines, just the drip of rain through exposed rafters. Another recalled the shock of finding her street unrecognizable, every familiar landmark erased. Andrew's aftermath revealed a deeper wound. Inspectors found that many homes failed not because of the storm's strength, but because shortcuts and weak building codes left them defenseless. Roofs were tacked down with little more than nails and hope. The destruction was total, but the lesson was clear. South Florida's way of building, its very foundation, had to change. For the families displaced, the question was not just when they would rebuild, but whether they could ever trust the walls around them again. After Andrew, the question wasn't just how to rebuild, but how to make sure the next storm didn't erase entire neighborhoods. The answer arrived in 2002. For the first time, Florida adopted a single statewide building code. Gone were the patchwork rules and local loopholes. Every new home, from Key West to Jacksonville, now had to meet the same hurricane standards. Roofs were anchored with metal straps and hurricane ties, trusses bolted to concrete block walls. Garage doors, windows, and even the smallest wall connections were engineered to resist winds up to 180 miles per hour along the coast. In Miami-Dade and Broward, the code went further. Impact-resistant glass became standard, tested to withstand debris, launched by a Category 5. Shutters, once optional, became a requirement for builders. State inspectors and structural engineers became household names in the years that followed. Their blueprints and checklists reached into every subdivision and condo tower. The code didn't just add cost, it brought peace of mind. Insurance companies, once battered by billion-dollar payouts, recalculated their risk models. Data from the first major storms after 2002 told a clear story. Homes built to the new standard suffered 87% less wind damage than their pre-code neighbors. In places like Cutler Bay and Naples, entire blocks of post-2002 houses stood with only minor repairs, while older homes lost roofs and walls. Yet even the best code has limits. Engineers warn that storm surge, not wind, remains the wild card. No amount of hurricane straps can save a house from 6 feet of salt water. And with every new development pushing closer to the coast or into low-lying land, the stakes keep rising. The physical resilience built since Andrew is real, but as market fragility grows, the true test is whether these safeguards can outpace the risks Florida keeps inviting. August heat presses down on South Florida, and the forecast map glows red. At 160 miles per hour, Aaron's winds spin offshore, a Category 5 threat wider than the peninsula itself. No evacuation order yet, but the market reacts first. In Fort Lauderdale, realtors cancel showings by the dozen, inboxes flood with withdrawal notices, and the MLS dashboard blinks with a single-week plunge, pending sales down 21.3%. Contracts that survived the insurance crunch now fall to a new obstacle. No one will write a policy. Insurers issue moratoria across Broward, Miami-Dade, and Palm Beach, freezing new coverage the moment the storm's cone grazes the coast. Underwriters flag every open file. Title companies halt closings. Lenders send out blanket delays, some automated, some frantic, all citing the same risk: storm uncertainty. On the ground, agents scramble to salvage deals. Slack threads fill with panicked questions. Is your buyer still in? Did the wire go through? Can we extend contingency another week? Some buyers, spooked by the headlines, walk away outright. Others try to renegotiate, demanding discounts to offset the insurance gap or the risk that their new home could be underwater, literally or financially, before the ink dries. In Coral Springs, a $1 million closing unravels when the insurer's moratorium hits an hour before funds are scheduled to transfer. The seller's moving truck idles in the driveway, waiting for a green light that never comes. Risk teams at the major carriers watch the National Hurricane Center feed in real time. Their algorithms are primed for forecast cones, not landfall. As soon as Aaron's path narrows toward Palm Beach, the system locks out new policies across 3 counties. No exceptions. No overrides. For buyers, it's an instant dead end. For sellers, it's a waiting game with no guarantee the deal will survive. Mortgage brokers field calls from clients desperate to close before the next advisory. Some try to rush paperwork, others throw up their hands. The math is simple. No insurance, no loan, no sale. Even homes far inland aren't immune. Lenders and insurers, burned by past storms, have widened their definition of risk. A single forecast update triggers operational freezes from Jupiter to Weston. Title agents issue blanket 72-hour holds, even in markets untouched by wind or rain. The paralysis spreads faster than the storm itself. In the space of a week, the pipeline clogs with stalled deals, canceled contracts, and buyers in limbo. Sellers who once fielded bidding wars now face silence. For realtors, the anxiety is minute by minute. Every phone call could be another lost sale. Every email a fresh cancellation. The storm hasn't made landfall, but the damage is already done. Confidence, once the fuel of Florida's boom, evaporates at the first sign of risk. A forecast, not a hurricane, has frozen the market in place. Governor DeSantis, facing headlines about buyers fleeing and deals collapsing, took the podium in Tallahassee with a promise to rewrite the rules. His plan, the so-called tax kill bill, pitched as a lifeline for homeowners drowning in costs. The proposal went further than any in state history. Eliminate property taxes outright, send $1,000 checks to every primary homeowner, and push for a constitutional amendment to ban local property levies for good. Legislative aides rushed to draft the language, carving out loopholes for homesteads, rental properties, and commercial parcels. Real estate lobbyists packed the committee rooms, some cheering, others warning that cities and schools would lose their main source of funding overnight. Critics wasted no time. Mayors from Miami to Orlando called the measure a political stunt, accusing the governor of chasing headlines while ignoring the real drivers of the crisis: runaway insurance, broken affordability, and the looming threat of climate risk. Economists pointed to the fine print. Without property taxes, local governments would be forced to slash services or hike sales taxes, shifting the burden onto renters and small businesses. Editorial boards ran op-eds with headlines like, "A rebate won't stop the flood," and "Don't gamble with our schools." Behind the scenes, industry groups scrambled to model the fallout. Internal memos from the Florida Association of Counties warned of $12 billion in lost revenue if the bill passed. Insurance executives, already battered by lawsuits and reinsurance hikes, wondered aloud whether a $1,000 rebate could even dent the average premium, now topping $6,500 in much of South Florida. For many homeowners, the math was simple. Insurance alone had doubled or tripled since 2021, wiping out any gain from a one-time check. As the bill wound through the legislature, Wall Street took notice. In New York, Blackstone's board convened an emergency session to review its Florida portfolio. Their Home Partners of America subsidiary had snapped up thousands of homes during the boom, betting on steady rent checks and rising values. Now, the spreadsheets told a different story. Insurance losses, tenant defaults, and falling appraisals had turned the Sunshine State from a cash cow into a liability. Over 6 months, Blackstone moved to liquidate more than $1 billion in Florida assets, single-family rentals, apartment buildings, and industrial parks. Properties that had fetched top dollar in 2022 now sold at a 27% loss, some sitting on the market for weeks before finding a buyer. The retreat sent shockwaves through the investment world. Other funds followed suit, quietly unloading inventory before the losses deepened. Real estate agents in Tampa and Fort Myers fielded calls from hedge fund managers asking for bulk sale discounts, their optimism from the boom years replaced by a scramble to get out before the next correction. For local sellers, it meant more competition and lower offers. For buyers, it was a warning. If the big players were leaving, maybe the risk was bigger than anyone wanted to admit. In Tallahassee, the governor doubled down, insisting that his plan would restore confidence and bring buyers back to the table. But in the neighborhoods where for sale signs multiplied, the mood was anything but hopeful. The promise of paradise had run aground on the hard edge of fiscal reality. As lawmakers debated rebates and tax cuts, the market watched and waited, wondering who would be left holding the bag if the exodus continued. The boom was over. The question now was how deep the bust would go. In 2021, over 330,000 people moved to Florida, fueling a housing boom that pushed prices in cities like Boca Raton from $480,000 to $975,000 in under 3 years. But behind the headlines and Governor DeSantis's boasts of a paradise on the rise, evidence showed mounting cracks. Insurance premiums doubled, 6 carriers failed, and more than 1.3 million policies shifted to the state-run Citizens insurer. When Hurricane Erin threatened in 2025, pending home sales in Fort Lauderdale collapsed by 21.3% in a single week, and institutional investors like Blackstone sold off $1 billion in assets at steep losses. Despite new building codes after Hurricane Andrew, the market's stability now relies on solving deep financial and environmental risks. What remains unclear is how policymakers and insurers will address the ongoing volatility. As the records and footage show, Florida's boom was real, but so is its fragility. The future of the state's housing market depends on confronting these systemic challenges head-on.